At the 2026 World Cup, Tunisia conceded 5 goals to Sweden in their opening match. Before they had even played their second game, they parted ways with head coach Sabri Lamouchi. Tunisia's 5-1 defeat to Sweden was more than just a poor start. It was the moment when problems that had been building for months suddenly erupted on the world stage. Sabri Lamouchi's World Cup journey ended before it had truly begun. He was replaced by one of international football's most unusual rescue specialists, Hervé Renard. Tunisia now faces an extremely narrow path forward. The matches against Japan and the Netherlands will determine not only the team's future in the tournament, but also whether the federation's radical decision was the right one. So why would a national team fire its coach after just one World Cup match? Was the defeat to Sweden really the only problem? And can Hervé Renard rebuild a broken team in just a few days? To understand Tunisia's crisis, we need to look beyond the 5-1 defeat. Grab your tea or coffee, sit back, and get comfortable. If you are ready, let's begin. The Eagles of Carthage arrived at the World Cup looking like a team that could rely on its defense. Tunisia had delivered consistent results during qualification. They gave their opponents very few chances and built a physically resilient system. However, the problems within the team were far greater than the scoreboard suggested. The early elimination against Mali at the Africa Cup of Nations had already tested the federation's patience. Tunisia entered that tournament with high expectations, but in the round of 16, they failed to beat a Mali side that had been reduced to 10 men and were eventually eliminated in a penalty shootout. Following that disappointment, the federation decided to make a coaching change and appointed Sabri Lamouchi. The job was never going to be easy for him. He was given two very different objectives. On one hand, he was expected to refresh an aging squad, create opportunities for new players, and build Tunisia's future. On the other, the World Cup was approaching quickly, and the federation wanted immediate results. This is one of the most dangerous contradictions in international football. When a coach is expected to rebuild a team while also delivering instant success, even the smallest mistake can become a major crisis. Lamouchi also took significant risks with his squad selection. He left out experienced players such as Ferjani Sassi and Yassine Maria, who had been important members of the national team for many years. The reasoning behind that decision was understandable. Lamouchi wanted to build a faster, younger, and more energetic side. But at a tournament as demanding as the World Cup, experience is about far more than the number of matches a player has played. Experienced players calm the team in difficult moments. They help maintain the structure on the field and provide balance in the dressing room. Tunisia had also failed to look convincing during its preparations for the tournament. The results, and especially the confusion in defense, had already raised warning signs before the match against Sweden. Even so, when the World Cup began, many believed Tunisia might be able to turn the page. But what happened in Monterrey destroyed that hope within minutes. Sweden started the match as the more aggressive and faster side. They looked like a team that knew exactly what it wanted to do. Tunisia, meanwhile, appeared uncertain from the opening whistle. The gap between the defensive line and the midfield continued to grow. The Tunisian players failed to position themselves correctly against Sweden's quick attacks. Individual errors combined with tactical problems. After the first goal, Tunisia's entire game plan collapsed. The team could not press effectively high up the field, nor could it safely defend the area around its own penalty box. Sweden found more space with each attack, while the Tunisian players became increasingly disconnected from one another. By the time the score reached 5-1, this was no longer simply about losing 3 points. A team that had arrived at the World Cup with major ambitions had completely lost control in its opening match. The 4-goal margin dealt a serious blow to Tunisia's chances of advancing, even under the new tournament format. More importantly, the performance sent a clear message to the federation. If the same structure remained in place for the second match, nothing was likely to improve. Sabri Lamouchi's dismissal was therefore not simply the result of one defeat, it was the result of a complete loss of confidence. Even so, the federation's decision will be remembered as one of the most severe interventions in World Cup history. Coaches have been dismissed or have stepped down during previous World Cups, but removing Lamouchi after only the first group stage match places this case in a completely different category. A coach who had spent months preparing for the World Cup lasted just 90 minutes at the tournament. This raises an important question. Do you think a federation that makes such a quick decision is showing courage, or is it simply panicking? According to one view, the Tunisian Football Federation chose to act rather than wait. There were serious problems with the team's performances, the players had lost confidence, and time was running out before the final 2 matches. If a change was going to be made, it had to happen immediately. According to the opposing view, however, dismissing a coach in the middle of a World Cup could push an already fragile team into even greater uncertainty. The new coach has almost no time to change the system, get to know the players, or introduce new tactical ideas. The responsibility for the opening defeat does not belong to the head coach alone. Squad planning, decisions made by the federation, the preparation period, and structural problems that had been building for years all contributed to the collapse. In the middle of this debate, Tunisia turned to a very familiar name, Hervé Renard. Renard holds a unique place in African football. His reputation cannot be explained by trophies alone. Throughout his career, he has repeatedly organized national teams with very different profiles in a short period of time. Winning the 2012 Africa Cup of Nations with Zambia was one of the most impressive achievements in the tournament's history. 3 years later, he lifted the same trophy with Ivory Coast. In doing so, he became the first coach to win the Africa Cup of Nations with 2 different countries. He later guided Morocco to the World Cup. Then, as head coach of Saudi Arabia, he defeated Argentina at the 2022 World Cup and produced one of the biggest upsets in the tournament's history. The teams Renard has coached tend to share one common characteristic. He quickly establishes a defensive structure. He gives his players simple, clear instructions, and he tries to unite the entire squad around a single psychological objective. These may be exactly the qualities Tunisia needs most right now. But this assignment could be more difficult than many of the challenges he has faced before. Renard does not have the benefit of a long training camp. He has no opportunity to select new players. He cannot spend weeks working on his tactics. He only has a few training sessions before the match against Japan. For that reason, Renard's first change cannot be tactical, it has to be psychological. He must help the players move on from the heavy defeat to Sweden. He needs to rebuild confidence within the team, and when they step onto the field, he must make them believe they are still alive in this tournament. From a tactical perspective, it is more realistic to expect simplicity than a major revolution. Against Japan, Tunisia must first reduce the gaps between its defensive lines. The spaces that appeared between midfield and defense against Sweden could be even more dangerous against Japan's quick and technically gifted players. Renard will most likely ask the team to remain more compact. He will want the players to recover their positions quickly after losing possession, and he may try to force Japan toward the wings rather than allowing them to attack through the center. In attack, Tunisia will need to take controlled risks. Simply defending will not be enough. The -4 goal difference from the opening match makes scoring essential. However, if the team leaves itself completely exposed while searching for an early goal, it could suffer another heavy defeat. Finding the right balance will be Renard's greatest challenge. Japan is no longer the likable surprise package of previous World Cups. In recent years, the country has produced many players who compete in Europe's biggest leagues. Japan has also repeatedly shown that it knows how to compete against elite opponents. This is a team that moves the ball quickly, makes good decisions under pressure, and is extremely dangerous in transition. Defeating Japan would not only be a tactical success for Tunisia, it would also prove that a group that fell apart only a few days earlier had managed to stand up again. The Netherlands will then be waiting in the final match. On paper, the Netherlands is one of the strongest teams in the group. The result of that game could determine Tunisia's fate. Under the new World Cup format, the best third-place teams also advance to the next round. That means Tunisia's chances are not completely gone. But because of the 5-1 defeat, every goal, every point, and every result in the other groups has now become extremely important. In other words, Hervé Renard does not simply need to win matches. He also needs to repair Tunisia's heavily damaged goal difference and make the team competitive again. What makes this story interesting is not only Tunisia's chance of advancing from the group, it also reveals the growing impatience of modern international football. The World Cup has expanded to 48 teams. More countries are reaching the football's biggest stage, but that expansion has not reduced the pressure on national federations. In fact, for many countries, simply qualifying for the World Cup is no longer considered enough. Greater investment, higher expectations, and reactions that spread across social media within minutes have reduced the margin for error for head coaches to almost zero. In the past, a team was often given time to recover after a poor opening match. Now, 90 minutes can be enough to end a project that took months to build. From Sabri Lamouchi's perspective, there's also a human side to this story. He arrived only a few months before the tournament. He worked under a federation demanding change amid controversial squad decisions and problems throughout the preparation period. The result against Sweden was his responsibility, but he was not solely responsible for the conditions that produced it. Football often looks for a single face to represent a complicated problem. When a team loses, the head coach becomes the first target. Tunisia changed the part that could be replaced most quickly. Now, all the pressure is on Hervé Renard. If Tunisia responds strongly against Japan and carries its hopes of advancing into the final group match, the federation's decision will be seen as bold and correct. If the team loses again, the change will only reveal how deep the crisis truly runs. Renard's career is filled with moments when he made seemingly impossible missions possible, but past achievements do not automatically turn into points on the field. His famous white shirt, powerful speeches, and experience in major tournaments may give Tunisia a psychological lift. However, the outcome will ultimately be decided by the players' discipline on the field. After only one match, Tunisia's path through the World Cup is already close to being shut. For Sabri Lamouchi, that door closed completely in just 90 minutes. For Hervé Renard, it is unexpectedly opened again. Now, only one question remains. Can Hervé Renard turn Tunisia back into a real team in just a few days? Or did the 5-1 collapse against Sweden decide the fate of the Eagles of Carthage at the 2026 World Cup on the very first day? Do you think the Tunisian Football Federation made the right decision? Should a coach be dismissed after only one World Cup match? And can Hervé Renard guide this team into the knockout stage? Share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the biggest stories of the 2026 World Cup, the events unfolding behind the scenes of the national teams, and the developments that could change the course of the tournament.